Hello, my name's Rob and welcome to Swift Slots. Now, if you've seen any of my past mail call videos, you may have seen in it that I bought this beautiful 1/24th scale Tamiya Lancia Stratos Group 5 kit to build as a slot car. Well, that day has come. I've decided to get this on my bench and start turning it into a slot car. So, I'll get you on my bench, I'll take you through the kit, and then we'll go to my workbench and we'll get cracking and turning it into a slot car. Now, just before we get this party started, I thought I would show you a couple of other Lancia Stratos Group 5 cars that I've got. One of them being this beautiful sideways slot car. Now, if you don't know much about sideways, I strongly recommend you go and check them out because they're absolutely fantastic cars. They're really nicely built and they're really quick. Absolutely fantastic cars, and I absolutely love this one. It goes really well. And no Swift Slots video would really be complete without a Hot Wheels inclusion, and this is my Hot Wheels Lancia Stratos Group 5 in Alitalia colours, and it's the Real Riders version, so it's a metal chassis, metal body, separate wheels and rubber tyres. Slightly higher quality than the standard ones, an extremely nice looking car. Again, it's all packeted because I'm a packet collector and that's just the way it is. I absolutely love this car. It's really cool. So there we are. So there is my Hot Wheels and there is my sideways. So let's get on with the video. Okay, so let's take a closer look at this Tamiya Lancia Stratos kit. Absolutely love this car. Can't wait to get building it. It's one of my favourite cars of all time, the Group 5 Stratos. So there's the body, all ready to go. As you can see, it's completely one piece, so it lends itself beautifully to a slot car. Very light as well. So that's the body. Then we have the tyres. They got a little bit of surface texture on them, which is quite nice. Now again, these are going to be turned into moulds, and then I should make PU tyres from the mould using these as the masters. So these won't be used on the actual kit. I should be using these as masters to make a full set of rubber PU tyres, which I will be offering for sale on my website if anybody wants to do the same thing. Then we have the interior, some of the interior parts, in as much as the driver and bits and bobs. Now, you might recognise this particular driver figure because this was the driver figure from the Banana. So this is the car that he belongs in, and he's now going to go back to his rightful home in the Stratos. There's the white parts for the rear wing and a couple of other little bits and bobs. And then we have the tree for the wheels, which are very nicely made. Now I'm going to have to do something with the back of these wheels because the hole isn't quite right in the back anyway. It's a little bit big, so I have to do something in there to sort of close up that hole, and then probably make an aluminium band around the outside to hold a grub screw and whatnot. But that's all fairly standard stuff for this channel. Then we have the glass, all looking nice and clear. Tamiya are known for their really nice clear glasses, and this is no exception, so that'll look good with the driver detail through the glass. And then we have probably the most exciting part of the whole kit, that being this chassis. Now I know you can't really see this through this camera. In fact, what I'll do is I'll open it up because we may as well. So the thing that makes this kit quite unique is the fact that it is actually supposed to have a motor right in here and a battery here and here. Now this kit is the lower grade kit, the one without the motor, but doesn't change the fact that it's supposed to have a motor. So getting this powered up as a slot car is going to be an absolute breeze because most of the hard work is already done. And also, there really isn't much interior to this car at all. There's a little bit of door panels and a little bit of a bulkhead and a seat and a bit of a dashboard, but there's nothing else going on. There's no really heavy subfloor to this or any sort of other heavy detail. It's really stripped back to bare basics. And you've got plenty of room here to get a guide, nice and forward of the front axle as well, or what will be the axle. Now, I also want to try and have this car with actual working steering coming off the guide. This car does have steering as standard. Here is one part here and the rest of it's there, and there's the knuckles there for the front wheels and so on. Now obviously they're all in plastic, so I think I'm going to change this to brass. I'm not quite worked out how I'm going to do it yet, but I'm sure it'll come to me as I get closer to doing it. So I want to basically beef up this front end into brass, have it running off the guide so it's got steering wheels as well. And I think that'd be quite a neat little feature of this build. Now, the other thing that I want to do with this car is actually, weirdly enough, not use some of these water slides. Now, I have got a big problem with this particular kit, in as much as the front of this body has some really nice louvers in it, and I really want to get those louvers to pop when I finish the model with a bit of Tamiya panel liner and everything else. Now, I am absolutely convinced that I'm not going to be able to get this front water slide, as nice as it is, into all those little grooves there in a way that I'm satisfied with. Even if I use some decal softener many times over, I just don't think I'm going to get this decal to lay down in those grooves and actually then have the panel liner soak into the grooves properly. I just don't think I'm going to do it. I've thought about this long and hard. So what I think I'm going to do is not use these green and red linings. I'm actually going to use the Mr. Colour paint. Now, Mr. Colour number 6 green is an almost identical match to what's here. Now, I'm sure that this red is a slightly orangey red. If you look at the picture on the box, that's a little bit more red, a little bit more orange, sorry, than red. So what I think I might do, although I'm showing you Mr. Colour 158, I might experiment with adding a few drops of orange to the 158 and try and find something that's a little bit more on the orange spectrum rather than on the red spectrum. So we can try and paint all this detail on instead and try and get the wheels to match as well. And I think that will give me a better outcome on my grills. However, masking into all these grills is going to be an absolute challenge. So I don't know how this is going to work out. Hopefully it'll work out well, but we're just going to have to see. There might be a lot of little corrections. So that's the basic kit covered. So obviously I'm going to need to power my Lancia Stratos with some slot car parts. So I have these. So the first thing I have here is a 38 tooth slotted gear. Now I've used this gear on the hot rod build I did a few months ago and it works really well. So I'm going to use it again. I've also got a completely standard Slotting Plus guide, which have never failed me yet, and they're very good. So got one of those. I've also got a hand-me-down Pt.1 Evo motor from my rally car. Now these are a very hot motor for general purpose use, and they're a bit too hot for rally cars because our rally stages are very short. There's no more than sort of 2 or 3 feet maximum long straights on the track, and these motors are just too torquey and fast for such a short track. So I actually downgrade my rally cars to a slightly lower spec NSR motor, so these become then surplus to requirements because they usually come in NSR cars and whatnot. So this is a hand-me-down. Now it's already got a 9-tooth pinion on it, and this engine will work extremely well in the Stratos on that 9-tooth, because between the 9-tooth and the 38 tooth I get a 4.2 to 1. Now that combination worked really well on my hot rod, and that was with a standard 20k motor that wasn't anything special at all. Although it had a large wheel, it had plenty of torque, reasonable top speed, and I was very happy with the performance. Now this is a much higher performing motor, but it's going on a much smaller diameter wheel. So I'm hoping that I'll still get a really good performance between these gears and this motor on this size wheel. Plus also this Stratos is very light. So I'm pretty sure that this motor is going to give me a reasonable turn of performance, especially around the tracks that I've got, because I don't have access to a large 24th scale track anymore. So this car is only ever going to be used on Ricard Valley, my own 8-foot long track. It's far too big for that track really. It will go around just, but I'm in no way going to find the limits of its performance on the tracks that I own. So this motor and these gearings will be absolutely fine for me personally. And if I do ever manage to find myself on a bigger track, I can always come down in gear size here to something like a 30 tooth and then pick the speed right up, because this motor's got more than enough power to hustle this car around any track, I'm sure. And then last but not least, I have a Slotting Plus 70mm axle, which would be great for replacing the back axle in this kit. Although this kit does actually come with an axle, because like I say, originally it was supposed to be powered with a motor, so they've left the standard metal drive shaft in there, but it's far too small and it's not really of much use to me. So we've got a Slotting Plus axle. Right, so with all that lot explained, let's hit the bench and let's get building this car. Okay, so that's the stage 1 hacking over and done with. So all I've done is I've ripped out everything in the back of this chassis. There's nothing there anymore. It's all nice and clean. And this hole here used to be the on-off switch. So all I've done is I've removed the little blade that you could get your finger on, sand it smooth, pop the cover over the hole, put a bit of MEK inside the hole, and now that's all gone. So this is the original axle from the original kit. You can pop it in the original hole and put it where it's supposed to be and pop the slotted gear into place. Now this car was always supposed to have a motor, so turning it into a slot car really isn't very difficult, and the fact that it is already supposed to have a motor in means that we've got access for gears, so we've got a wider arch on this side than this side, we got access for the motor. It's all really good. So here is our standard motor, and we can pop that in there in a standard sidewinder configuration, and you can see that the whole thing fits absolutely great. There's no problems with this. We're off to a flying start with this particular car. Plenty of clearance. Like I say, I've cleared out all this arch here as well to give me more access, and now we've got plenty of access for the screws for the motor, gears and everything. So what I intend to do now is make a pair of weird bearings. In fact, they're going to be long 4mm bearings that run in this gap all the way back to here, and then glue and rivet 3 times across here, and exactly the same on this side here. And that means that I can get my bearings nice and strong fixed to the chassis, but well away from everything else, and it'll make a really convenient, neat installation. So let's get these bearings made up, bonded and riveted into place, and then we'll come back and we'll get the motor mount made. Okay, so that's the bearing blocks made and soldered to the brass plate, and the brass plate has been glued and riveted to the bottom of the chassis, and I put a spot of paint on the tops of all the rivet heads there, and you can see the bottom of the bearings go all the way down flush to the bottom of the chassis, going through the holes that were already in the chassis when we started, and we can see the exit hole is exactly where it was on the original car. And if we put the axle in through the bearings, you can see the axle is nice and free to turn, and there's no wobble at all. So their bearings are absolutely in the correct plane. Right, now we need to get the motor mount made. Okay, so the way I've set this up is I've made this brass plate which will eventually be glued and riveted to the bottom of this chassis, and that will go in there like that. I've also drilled just 2 holes for the time being in the front here to register this plate. They will eventually be riveted from the other side, with the round heads being on this side. Once it's all finished, I'll then drill 2 more holes in the back and then rivet it again from the back side, making sure the rivets land on these 2 pieces of plastic here because they're slightly lower than the rest of the chassis, so the heads will be nice in that position. So that rivet will go in there as well. That will hold this plate in. You can also see that I've made this front plate and screwed the motor on already. I've also made the rear plate, and I've drilled 1 hole in the bottom ready for this nut and bolt to go in the back, so that if you ever want to replace this motor, you can undo this plate and you can take the whole motor out. So that will go on there like that for the time being. The motor then will be placed into the chassis like that. I will then set the backlash using the gap between the axle and the motor, which is basically this piece of paper, and on there you can see that there'll be the exact right amount of backlash just there when I've adjusted it. So that's how I'm going to do it there. So once I've got my backlash set, I'm going to put a spot of solder just inside there, just quickly, just to solidify the front mount. I'll take it all out, I'll solder the front mount in properly, and then I can refit it all in, gluing it all and riveting it all and making sure it's all proper. Right, let's get on with that. And there we are. That concludes the fitment of the back end. And here you can see the rear motor bracket with its removable nut in the bottom. And that nut is fitted to that bolt, and you can see the other rivets that I've used to hold all the brass work in, and everything that I've fitted is below the level of the chassis, so nothing will scrape on the track. And if you look closely in here, you can actually see the backlash, all nice and even all the way around, no problems at all. And if you look carefully, you can see the motor mount screws that are easy access if you ever need to remove the motor at a future date. So if I put power to the chassis, we should see some life. And we do. So there we are. It's a bit noisy at the moment because this chassis is a little bit drummy, but I can always put some felt in the chassis and hopefully that'll stop that if it does turn out to be a little bit noisy. Now you might wonder why I'm using red wires here, because some of my older projects needed black wires because all the wire was exposed, and this car has got non-exposed wire, so I'm safe to use up some of my excess of red. And a lot of this wire can actually be hidden inside the interior, as there's a bulkhead that goes here and there's a seat and so on, and I can thread that wire underneath the driver's feet and through the seat, maybe even through the center console, so all this wire will be hidden. So there we are, that's the back end done. Now we need to move on to the front end. Okay, so that basically finishes part 1. So this is the mould all setting up so I can cast my PU tyres. Here you can see I've added in a little bit of felt into the back of this chassis just to start helping with the dampening down of the vibrations, because this is quite a drummy chassis because it's so large. So that will start to help. I shall fit more in the front as we go on through the build. And here we can see the wheels. Now what I had to do is put brass inserts into these wheels and then machine out the insert after I'd put the insert in. Because these wheels aren't the truest in the world, I've had to put the insert in, get the wheels all trued up, and then drill the hole so the hole is true to the actual wheel itself, and the boss can do whatever it wants to do. So they're all set up really nicely, and when I made the insert, I machined in 2 lands, 2 little grooves where it can actually hold glue. So when you push this in, the glue doesn't all squeeze back out, so there's actual glue in there as well. So those inserts have been made and they fit perfectly to the axle on this car. There's a really nice fit, absolutely the right fit. And then what I should do is I should fit these aluminium cups that I've made onto the back of the wheel with a bit of glue once the wheels are painted. Now the way this works is this kit is supposed to have brake discs, and these are the brake discs that they supply, and they're supposed to be painted up silver, pushed on the back of the wheel all the way to the little stops in there, and then that represents the brake disc. So I've made these little caps, so the actual cap at the face of that cap now looks like a brake disc. Apart from the fact that I can't fit them until the wheels are painted, because there's no way to mask off that surface while the wheel's being painted. So once the wheel is painted, I should put a bit of glue on the inside there. I should push these inserts all the way in. Then I should put them back in the lathe, find the centre, drill and tap that boss then to M2, which will then give me something really solid to bolt the axle to. Now, on the subject of paint, look what I've got. Tamiya LP50. Now, this is exactly the right paint that Tamiya recommend to paint the wheels as per the instructions just here. Tamiya LP50 on the wheels, and that will match the actual stripes on the body as well. So that concludes part 1. We've got our tyres all setting up, we've got the back wheels ready to go, and we've finished the back end completely as far as we can absolutely go. So with the back end fully finished and the correct paint found, so I don't have to mix up my Mr. Colour paints anymore, and the full set of tyres all setting up in a rubber mould ready for part 2, that brings us nicely to the end of part 1. So in part 2, I'm going to be turning my attentions to the front end, going to get that steering all working, get the guide fitted, and turn this standard kit chassis into a slot car chassis. Now, if you've enjoyed this sort of content, maybe you'll subscribe. And if you could hit the little bell button, that would be awesome. So until the next time, thank you very much.